The small, isolated town of Black Hollow had always been known for its eerie quiet, its winding roads disappearing into thick forests, and its strange, unexplained occurrences. At the heart of it all was the local radio station, Whispering Pines FM, where host Mark Rivers delivered his nightly show, A Midnight Echoes. For years, Mark had captivated listeners with chilling tales of the supernatural, often sharing ghost stories sent in by locals who swore they were true. His voice, deep and steady, was a comforting presence in the darkness. Until the night it wasn't. It started with a flicker. Midway through a particularly unsettling story about a vanished hiker, the broadcast cut out abruptly, replaced by a deafening burst of static. The noise wasn't the usual white noise of a lost signal, it was something else. A low, guttural hum that seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own. Listeners who called the station found the lines dead, and those who tried to tune in to other frequencies discovered something even stranger. Whispering Pines FM was still transmitting, but now it was nothing but that unsettling static, bleeding into every channel. By morning, the town was buzzing with unease. Some claimed they'd heard whispers in the static, fragments of voices begging for help. Others swore the noise had followed them home, creeping into their dreams. The station's manager insisted it was just technical difficulties, but when the signal persisted into the next night, still no Mark, still no stories, just that endless, breathing static, people began to wonder if something far darker had taken over the airwaves. And then the nightmares started. The broadcast booth was eerily silent when Lisa pushed open the door, the faint hum of dormant equipment the only sound. The stale scent of coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of old electronics. Mark's chair sat empty, pushed back haphazardly, as if he'd stood up in a hurry. A half-finished mug of coffee rested on the desk, still lukewarm, evidence that he couldn't have been gone long. But the microphone was off, the lights dimmed, and the usual background noise of the station was absent. The silence was suffocating. Lisa's fingers trembled as she reached for the scattered cassette tapes strewn across the desk. One was still in the player, its spools unmoving. She pressed play, and at first there was only static. Then, beneath the hiss, a whisper. A voice so faint it was almost inaudible, murmuring words she couldn't quite make out. She turned up the volume, her breath catching as the whispers grew clearer. Not Mark's voice, but something else. Something that seemed to respond to her presence, shifting as if aware she was listening. A chill crawled up her spine when she realized the whispers weren't just random noise. They were fragments of conversations, bits of Mark's broadcasts, spliced with something else. A low, guttural voice, repeating her name. Lisa jerked back, knocking over the coffee cup. The liquid spilled across the desk, bleeding into the tapes. The whispers distorted, warping into a sharp, staticky laugh. She spun around, suddenly certain she wasn't alone. The booth felt smaller, the shadows darker. The air pulsed with an unnatural energy, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw the flicker of movement in the control room's darkened window. A shadow passing just beyond the glass, watching. But when she turned, there was nothing. Only the echo of whispers, still murmuring her name. Lisa's fingers trembled as she sifted through the clutter on Mark's desk. The station had fallen into an eerie silence since his disappearance, and the air in the broadcast room felt thick with something unspoken. Beneath a stack of old records, she found it, a plain, yellowed envelope with no return address. The paper inside was brittle, the handwriting jagged, as if scribbled in haste. They're listening. Turn to 88, SIFM, the dead speak there. The words sent a chill down her spine. Lisa had worked alongside Mark for years, and he'd never mentioned anything about a forgotten frequency. She glanced around, half expecting to catch movement in the shadows. The station's usual hum of machinery had been replaced by an unsettling quiet, broken only by the occasional crackle of static from the speakers. Curiosity gnawed at her. She approached the control panel, hesitating before twisting the dial to 88.6. At first there was only silence. Then, a whisper, so faint she almost missed it. A voice, layered beneath the static, murmuring words she couldn't quite decipher. It didn't sound like Mark, nor did it sound entirely human. The longer she listened, the more the whispers seemed to coil around her, as if crawling from the speakers themselves. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. The whispers cut off abruptly. When she turned, there was no one there, just the empty hallway stretching into darkness. Lisa clutched the anonymous letter tighter. Whoever, or whatever, had contacted Mark knew something about his disappearance, and now, she feared, it knew she was listening too. Lisa's hands trembled as she adjusted the dial on the old radio transmitter in the abandoned broadcast booth. The static hissed and crackled, a relentless white noise that filled the empty room. She had spent hours poring over Mark's notes, tracing his last steps before he vanished. The anonymous letter he'd received spoke of a frequency, one that didn't officially exist, where the dead could speak. With a deep breath, she turned the knob to the exact numbers scrawled in the letter. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, like a whisper rising from the depths, a voice emerged, broken, desperate. It was Mark. His words were fragmented, as if fighting against some unseen force. "Help me, trapped, he's here." His voice cut in and out, swallowed by bursts of static. Lisa leaned closer, her pulse roaring in her ears. She had to find him. Then, without warning, the static twisted into something else. A low, guttural chuckle that made her blood run cold. Another curious soul. Though the voice was smooth, deliberate, dripping with an unnatural amusement. It wasn't Mark, it was something older, darker. Lisa's fingers froze on the dial as the voice continued. "Dr. Elias Drake, a pleasure to finally meet you, my dear." She recoiled. Drake. The name sent a jolt through her. The disgraced scientist whose experiments had ended in fire and blood decades ago. His voice shouldn't exist, he was dead. Mark has been entertaining company. Drake mused, his tone almost playful. "But he's not as strong as you. I can feel your fear from here. It's delicious." Lisa's breath hitched. The radio screeched suddenly, a metallic scream that forced her to yank her hands away. When the noise faded, Mark's voice was gone, replaced by something worse. Drake's laughter filled the room, echoing as if it came from every corner at once. "Tune in tomorrow, won't you? The show is just getting started." Then, silence. Lisa staggered back, her mind racing. The frequency wasn't just a signal. It was a door. And something had just stepped through. The nights grew heavier in the quiet town, as if the air itself had thickened with dread. At first, the dreams were dismissed as odd coincidences, vivid, unsettling, but fleeting. Then, as the days passed, the nightmares became unmistakably identical. Townspeople woke in cold sweats, their hearts pounding, each describing the same scene: a dimly lit room with peeling wallpaper, the scent of ozone and rust, and him. Drake. His gaunt, spectral figure loomed over them, his voice a rasping whisper, demanding names. At the diner, the post office, even the schoolyard, hushed conversations erupted. Children drew scribbled pictures of a tall man with broken glasses. Adults exchanged nervous glances, their exhaustion evident in the bags under their eyes. Some claimed to hear Drake's voice even while awake, a faint hiss beneath the static of their radios or televisions. The local doctor prescribed sleeping pills, but they only deepened the hold of the nightmares. Patients reported being ever aware they were dreaming yet unable to wake. Then, the disappearances began. First, old man Henderson, who'd called the sheriff about shadow people in his basement. Then Ms. Langley, the librarian who'd tearfully confessed to her book club that Drake had whispered her address in the dream. Their bodies were found days later, arranged in grotesque tableaus, their faces frozen in silent screams. Lisa, poring over Mark's notes, found a pattern: every victim had reported hearing the forgotten frequency before the dream started. The radio station's emergency broadcast system had been hijacked, pulsing Drake's influence like a venom through the airwaves. As she tuned her car radio to the static-laden channel, she heard it. Not just Mark's muffled cries, but something worse. A guttural chant, growing louder. Names. The list wasn't random, it was alphabetical, and the next name was hers. The abandoned laboratory loomed at the edge of town, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into the night. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps as she pushed open the rusted gate, the hinges screaming in protest. The pages of Mark's notebook had led her here, his frantic scribbles describing a place where the walls between worlds grew thin. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and decay, the remnants of Dr. Drake's experiment still humming with a faint, unnatural energy. Flickering lights guided her deeper into the lab, where she found Mark slumped against a cracked console, his eyes wide with terror. His lips moved, but no sound came out, only static, as if his voice had been swallowed by the same force that trapped him. Behind him, a shimmering rift pulsed in the air, tendrils of shadow curling like smoke. Then she saw it, a figure emerging from the distortion, its features twisting into the grinning visage of Dr. Drake. His voice slithered into her mind, whispering promises of resurrection. Mark's body convulsed as Drake's spirit coiled around him, fingers digging into his shoulders like claws. "He's almost mine," the doctor crooned, his words echoing from the radio equipment stacked around the room. Lisa realized with dawning horror that the lab wasn't just a ruin. It was a bridge, and Drake was using Mark as a vessel to cross it. The air crackled with static, the same eerie noise that had replaced Mark's final broadcast. She had to act fast.